Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million and beyond as you up arrow your business and your personal life. Joining me today is Nancy Harhut. Nancy is the author of the award-winning book, Using Behavioral Science in Marketing, Driving Customer Action and Loyalty by Prompting Instinctive Responses. And I actually have a copy of it here. I've read through, I can't say that I've read through every page, but I've read through most of this. It is a big book. And what's nice about it is I'd say that it's non sequitur, if I would, right? Like there's 17 chapters and they're almost like different tactics or things or principles that we can apply. So you can kind of like skip around, which I appreciated in it. Maybe that's not the way you intended it, but that's the way I read it.
Nope, that's the way I intended it. Thank you. Yep.
Cool.
You can write. You can go cover to cover if you want, and there's a certain logic to that. But you're welcome to kind of parachute in and out if you've got a particular subject you want to find out about or a particular challenge you're trying to solve. So yeah, you're doing it right. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I want to also say that you are also the co-founder of HPT Marketing, which is a creative agency that increases response to emails, direct mail, landing pages, and more by prompting the decision-making shortcuts your customers and prospects routinely rely on. Nancy, again, I've enjoyed the book very much. I'm excited to have you here on the show today.
Now, William, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed the book, and I'm excited to be here and to chat about using behavioral science in marketing. So thank you.
Yeah, perfect. And I have to give a shout out to Will Leach, previous guest on the Up Arrow podcast, author of Marketing Mind States. He's the one who introduced us, and I'm very thankful for that. Really enjoyed that podcast as well. If you want, go back and listen to that as well. Actually, I have his book handy here as well, because why not? I figured we are going to talk about him, but here's that book too, Marketing to Mind States. I feel like maybe I'm on the Reading Rainbow right now, right? Like this is a book review. LeVar Burton, is that you? Reading Rainbow. Anyways, moving on. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly 800 million and one that IPO'd. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, on to the good stuff. This book, okay, so we're talking about this a little bit. I really like the quote. There's a lot of good quotes on here, but I really like the one that Mark Schaefer says, which is a tour de force, the most intelligent marketing book I have read in years. That's a really big thing to say. Why do you think that he's saying that this is, the most intelligent marketing book?
So I was, over the moon when he gave me that quote. I was so happy and so appreciative. He said that he hadn't really read anything like this. He found that it was incredibly actionable and practical, and he felt that it would really make a difference for marketers. And he told me he was giving it its an honest review, which I think is high praise coming from a guy like Mark, who's so accomplished and so intelligent, and who's written a number of books on his own. So I was very happy, and I wasn't going to argue with him. If he thinks that, then great.
Yeah. That's good. Well, and it's not just Mark. The first 4 pages are practically a who's who in marketing praising this book. A lot of names that I loved and recognized in there, and so that's a good thing to see. And I would agree with him about it being very actionable and practical. That's what I felt as I read through this, where it's like, I don't know if you remember this. There was I don't remember even where I read this, but Shakespeare wasn't that great of a writer to begin with. And you can look at his earlier works to decide like, oh, he really was, mediocre at best. Like nobody would have thought anything of it. But you could see him learning over time. And it was really interesting. You could see him start to employ basically different literary devices to improve his writing. And you're like, oh, now he just discovered, alliteration. And now he's going really hard on that. And so you can see this throughout time. But I kind of felt like that's how this book was for me, where I was like, oh, I could take one of these concepts, chapter 3, and I could break it down and actually just start to apply that to whatever business it is that I'm working on right then. It felt very practical, where it's like, great, I'm going to do a deep dive for this month on just chapter 3.
No, that's great. And the idea was, quick, easy to read. At the end of every chapter are the takeaways. There's, also mistakes to avoid. There's one mistake to avoid in each chapter. There's a little mini case study. I just tried to make it as simple and easy and accessible as possible, because people are busy, people are busy. And
Yes.
it's called Using Behavioral Science for Marketers, but it's written for people who aren't necessarily marketers, but maybe who have marketing as one of the many things on their to-do list. And so I wanted to make it accessible to people, and you can get in, get out, get your idea, get it into the market, and benefit from it. And so it's there's just enough science to explain why you can trust this, but it's much longer on the practical application. And several people have said to me, it's like, every time I read it, I underscore something else and say, I've got to test that, I've got to try that, I'm going to use that. And then sometimes people come back to me and actually say, I just got this great response, which really, makes me very, very happy, when they
Yep.
think to write back and say, I've tested it and it worked. And I don't know if it's because they thought, wow, that's surprising, I didn't think it was going to work, I better let her know it does. Or if they're just really being, enthusiastic and kind and wanting to get back to me. But it's great to hear that, people,
Yeah.
they see something like that would work for me, they try it, it does, and that's great. And, and the truth of the matter is, nothing is going to work for everybody.
Sure.
Just because something worked for one person, it may not work for you. Just because it works for you, it may not work for another person. But in this game, it's all about testing, as you well know, as your listeners well
hmm
know. And this gives you a leg up in terms of what you're going to test, right? Because we know we
Yeah.
have to test, but let's stack the deck in our favor. Let's test something that's more likely to win, that's more likely to produce the response we're looking for. And that's what the book does. There's 282 pages, I think, or 288, I forget. Anyway, 17 chapters and over 25 very practical, actionable things that someone
hmm
can take and run with and get out in the market in order to increase engagement response. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to dig into this. There's a lot of things that I've read that I want to kind of talk about. But before we get into, let's say, the improvements in the tactical and the practical, let's start with the problem. We were talking about this, like there's a problem in marketing. And there's a really good tweet that I just read this morning by Brett Swenson. Brett is the EVP of Kizik Shoes, which is a really great shoe brand out in like the Salt Lake City, Utah area. I think he was at Purple before, and there's a really good D2C community out there in Utah. But this is what he said, and I'm going to go into what you said, which I really appreciate too. But he said, where we've lost the art of marketing. We're too focused on spreadsheets instead of romancing our customers through thoughtful emotion invoking moments. And I'm like, yes, this is something that I talk about all the time, which is like romancing the customer. What do you think about that?
Well, I think he has a very good point. There was a time, a long time ago, when it was all about romancing the customer and,
Sure.
and romancing the products and the services. And then, enter technology. And I have no beef against technology. Technology has helped us be more effective and more efficient. But suddenly it seems like the pendulum has swung that way. And it's,
hmm
not about what you're putting out. It's how quickly you're getting it out and how efficiently you're getting it out and, where you're putting it. And really, once you've optimized all of that, and good for you if you have, you should, but once you've optimized all that, the biggest opportunity you have for any kind of leverage is in your creative. It's,
hmm
the message you're putting out there. It's how you're romancing the products and the services, how you're building that relationship with your customers, how you're kind of getting in their heads and, solving their problems and answering their needs and lighting a fire under their goals. It's going to be that, the creative that's going to
hmm
make the difference, because all of your if you think about it, all of your competitors have access to the same technology. They can,
Sure.
buy the same list. They can buy the same, ads on the same distribution channels. They can hire the same, coders to do the back end of their site. But it's that language and that romance that, the art part of it, I guess, that needs
hmm
to maybe come back a little bit more. And oddly, given my title is Using Behavioral Science in Marketing, it does help with the art part of it. It does
Yes.
help you get inside your customers' heads and make the emotional connections and paint the right pictures. So there's a lot of good stuff in there that will help you kind of balance out the tech end of things.
There's a science to the art, and there's an art to the science, right?
Perfectly put, William. Yes.
So this is what you said though in your book that I really appreciated when we're like really getting into it's like what is the problem in marketing? You said mistake, making your ads so captivating that people pay attention to it and remember it, but not the marketing message associated with it. And I was like, ooh, that's good. Is that the problem that you see in marketing that we're really trying to address by just using better behavioral marketing?
Well, it's one of the problems, honestly.
Okay.
Sometimes, we're just talking about like the art and the creativity and romancing. And, sometimes, and I am a creative person. I grew up as a copywriter and then became a creative director. Like that is my end of the world. But sometimes the creative teams run amok. They do. They get so excited about their idea that, that the idea kind of overshadows the product and
Sure.
maybe even the category in some cases. There have been studies that show pardon me, people will be asked like, what was your favorite ad on the Super Bowl, and they'll be given a list of different advertisers, this brand, that brand, who do you like the best? And at one point when the study was run, they slipped in a name of a brand that didn't advertise, and it still got a huge number of, people saying, oh yeah, I love their ad. We don't always remember, we get so caught up in the ad, oh, that's funny, or,
Sure.
but then it's like, well, what was it for? I don't know. Like I annoy my friends because they're like, "Oh my God, Nancy, I just saw this, this TV spot that I loved, and it did this, and then it did this, and then they said this," and I'm like, "That's cool. What was it for?" No, we're not really sure. How about the category? And
Uh-huh.
so that's one of the things we have to worry about. We want to be entertaining, we want to be informative, we want to be attention getting, absolutely. But we also have to make sure that we link back to, our product, our brand, our service, so that when people walk away, they remember the main message
Mhm,
and not just
mhm.
the funny story or the laugh that they got.
Here's a very modern example of this that I don't know if you're on TikTok or not. These ads have started to trickle over from TikTok onto Facebook Meta as well. But there's this thing we call like a thumb stop ratio, which is you got to get people to stop, right? They're scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Got to get them to at least stop. And one of the ways that people are doing this, and at least a trend, is something absolutely ridiculous that has nothing to do with anything else that's going on. And an example that I could think of right now is there's like this horse or donkey or something, real one, that kind of like rolls over a fence, like head first. It's kind of like just kind of like rolls over it, and then it's like as the donkey rolls, then it's like somebody else rolls right out of a truck. So it's like it's seamless, right? So it's like, hey, by the way, I've got this thing to tell you about, kind of thing. And so it's like, well, it got your attention. It was good, but there's the reality is, I don't know if I can. I can't even right now. I can't recall who this ad was, what it was for. I remember the donkey very well.
So yeah, no, and I mean, and if it happened to be for, I don't know, a feed and supply company,
Sure,
well, maybe that would have been a nice link or something.
sure.
But yeah, that's a good example of the danger. It's like yes, it catches your attention, and we do have to, and it's harder and harder to break through and get someone's attention, no question about it. But if you kind of over-index on that,
Mhm,
you can lose people, and then that's money that's not well spent because you're spending all this money to entertain people, but they forget who you are. And
mhm.
so we've got to find that balance. That's absolutely something that's important these days.
So let's start digging into the ways that we fix marketing in the way that it's maybe currently being done. One of the things that you brought up to me when we were chatting before is that people don't think the way marketers think they do. How do people actually think?
Yeah, so it's very true. For years, we as marketers have been lied to, really, because we've been told if we get the right message to the right person at the right time, we'll get the right result. And that's only part of the story. Because what we have
Mm,
to do is get the right message to the right person at the right time and in the right way. And when I say in the right way, I mean a brain-friendly way. Um, the truth of the matter is, I like to think that I make well thought out, well considered decisions. William, you probably think the same thing. And by extension, we think that our customers and our prospects do, right? Like, no one
mhm,
says they're influenced by advertising. Nobody says that they, do what they don't want to do, like they were forced into it. We all feel like we know exactly why we're doing what we're doing and when we do it. And the truth, though, is that's not the case. Up to 95% of purchase decision making takes place in the subconscious mind. Um,
mm,
and the reason for this is we couldn't possibly weigh every bit of information before making a decision, or we wouldn't get around to making any. So we
yeah.
we kind of cruise along on autopilot. We've developed these hardwired, reflexive, automatic, instinctive reactions. We cruise along on autopilot, we encounter a situation, and we just respond, giving the matter at hand little, if any, thought. And that's the thing that marketers have to understand. We're kind of laboring and creating under this illusion that if we just put the right information in front of people, they will come to the right decision. They'll make the logical choice that they should buy from us. But
Sure.
they're very rarely in that moment with their thinking caps on, weighing the pros and cons, consciously engaging. They're cruising along on autopilot, and But the good news is, if we know this, we can use it in, to our advantage, because there are certain ways that we can prompt these decision-making shortcuts that people have. If we know that when somebody sees Y, they're going to do X. If we want them to do X, let's make sure we show them Y. Let's
Hmm.
use these little prompts in order to increase the likelihood people do what we do. So it's not as well thought out and well considered as rational as we think, but that presents an opportunity for us.
I couple of years ago, a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago, skinny jeans were becoming cool. Now they're phasing out, but I can remember, I didn't want to get rid of my boot cut jeans, and so I had to make a decision. I needed a new pair of jeans because my jeans were old, and so I was like, I didn't just need a new pair of jeans though. I needed to decide if I was changing my entire style at this point in time. It's like, am I finally going to adopt, the style that exists out there? So I did make a spreadsheet of jeans and the different jeans that I was looking at and why, and what are the pros and what are the cons. And my wife's like, you're a psycho, right? But to your point, if I tried to make every decision that way, I would never be able to accomplish anything. Decision fatigue would set in. It's impractical. It's impossible. And so I can see that. So what's funny is I probably got to the end of that spreadsheet, and without realizing it, I probably still made an emotional decision. I probably still based it on some of these shortcuts and wasn't as based on logic as I thought that it was at that time. And you mentioned like there are these shortcuts. What are some of these shortcuts, or what potential shortcuts was I potentially exploring at that moment that I didn't even realize?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. So, I think, the very fact that you decided to put together the spreadsheet, right? What was happening there was, I think, social proof. So when we're not sure of what
Sure.
to do, we look to others, we follow their lead, right? So if a bunch of people are doing something, we assume, well, I guess we should do it. So all of a sudden, skinny jeans are in. So what did you do? You're like, Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe I should be getting. I'm not really sure, but maybe I should. Maybe I should be getting skinny jeans because that's what everyone else is doing, right? It wasn't like you woke up one day, no one else was
Sure.
doing it. You said, I think skinny jeans are for me. No, it would have
Sure.
never entered your mind. But because everyone else was doing it, you were like, I
Hmm.
don't know, maybe I should be too. So I think that was one of the things. There's also the idea of loss aversion, where as humans, we're twice as motivated to avoid the pain of loss as we are to achieve the pleasure of gain. But of course, in marketing, we often double down on the gains, all the gains and benefits and all the advantages and wonderful things that will happen if you buy my product or sign up for my service. And it's not that benefits don't work; they do. But the
Sure.
idea of loss aversion can be even more powerful because we don't like to miss out. And in this case, you were thinking, well, should I get the jeans? If I don't, I'm going to miss out. Maybe I'm going to miss out on a really cool trend. Maybe I'm going to miss out
Hmm.
on looking really
Hmm.
good. Maybe I'm going to feel like a social outcast because all of my friends are doing it and I'm not. So I think there was an element of that as well. Um,
Yeah, touche.
and then there's also the notion of novelty. The human brain is hardwired to seek out the new and novel because when we think we found it, the reward center in our brain is activated. Dopamine is released. That's a feel-good chemical, among other things. And so as a result, we're always jonesing for that next hit of dopamine. So the next new thing that comes out, the new trend, the new fashion, whatever it is, we're like, oh, let me check this out. I found
Mm.
something new. And I'm going to maybe get that hit of dopamine, and that's going to feel good. So I think any or all of those things may have been at play as you were putting together that spreadsheet diligently, figuring out what kind of jeans you were going to get.
Well, this is tangential, but you talked about dopamine. What do you think about like these dopamine resets? Have you heard of that? Where it's like we've almost become so addicted to dopamine hits that there's people are trying to get away from their phones and like try to reset the body's response to dopamine. Is it good? Yeah, bad? I don't know.
Yeah, well, it is interesting. We're talking about the fact that people's attention spans are short, that they've got a lot of demands on their attention, that they're making, all of the, up to 95% of their decisions subconsciously because they can't weigh all of the information. And so pulling back a little bit and quieting your mind and not having as many demands on you and not being, a slave to every time that the phone bings, right?
Hmm.
And that is dopamine, that little bing. It's like, oh, something new. What is it? What could it
Sure.
be? Maybe someone liked my post. Maybe someone sent me an email. Maybe I got an offer for something, or a text about something. But yeah, it's like you can kind of be on this treadmill about it, and it's maybe not the worst thing in the world to try to step back a little bit and say, okay, I've got to detox a bit.
Hmm. Um, you talked about in your book, one of the ones that I really liked, one of these shortcuts then that we're calling this is autonomy bias. You said that it's one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior. What's autonomy bias?
So it's really interesting, William. Behavioral scientists have found that people have this very deep-seated desire to exert some kind of control over ourselves and our environments, right? A psychologist would call it agency. We want agency, but we
Hmm.
want some kind of control. We Simply put, we don't like to feel forced or pushed or shoved in a direction. We like to feel that we're in charge. And so, from a marketing perspective, anytime that we can make our customers and prospects feel like they're in charge, as opposed to, that they're being pushed into something, that's a good thing. Because if you feel like you're being pushed into something, um, you have no option, right? A lot of times you just push back and you say, I'm going to react against it. I'm not going to do anything at all, or I'm going to
Hmm.
do the exact opposite
Hmm.
thing, right? But if you can make somebody feel like they're the ones calling the shots, they're the ones in charge, you're much more likely to get the response you're looking for. And a great way to do that is to give people choices. Because if you have a choice, the
Sure.
skinny leg jeans or the boot cut, if you have a choice, you're the one making the choice, and by
Hmm.
definition, you're the one in charge. You've got the autonomy. And so anytime we can give customers choices, how they interact with us, how they shop with us, the product line, the good, better, best, whatever it is, anytime we can give somebody a choice, that's a really good thing. As a matter of fact, there's some research that came out of Tulane University that found if you provide an option, you can nearly quadruple the likelihood someone will make a buying decision in the moment. Because if you put
Wow.
one thing in front of someone, here's your jeans, you have to decide, well, do I or do I not want this particular
Hmm.
pair, and so maybe you think, well, I don't know, I'll do some research, I'll talk to my friends, I'll, Google it, I'll put together a spreadsheet, whatever, I'm going to do some research, but if you put two things in front of somebody, the question goes from do I or do I not want this to, oh, which of these two do I want? We make it, easy. There's context, there's comparison, and the brain likes to take the easy way out. And in the first case, with only one option, there's a lot more work to decide whether or not you
Sure.
want it. But when there's two, you've got that automatic built-in comparison. It's a lot easier to make a decision, and as a result, you're much more likely to make it. That said, two is better than one, three is a magic number. I wouldn't go beyond five. I wouldn't say, like, oh, people like choices, good, let's give them 20, because then
Sure.
analysis paralysis sets in, and, it's like people can't make a decision, or if they do, they
Yep.
constantly wonder, did I leave something better on the table? And then related to the idea of autonomy bias is something called the BYAF technique. BYAF stands for but you are free. And what behavioral
Mm.
scientists have found is you can tell someone what you want them to do, you can ask them to do it, and if you follow that request with a phrase like, but you're free to choose, or it's up to you, the choice
Mm.
is yours, it's your call, you can on average double the likelihood people will do what you want. And I know it
Mm.
sounds counterintuitive because we're trying to get someone to do something. Why would we at that very moment that we've asked them then pull back and say, but you know what, it's up to you? But it reminds people that they're the ones in charge. It brings that idea of autonomy to the surface. It becomes very top of mind, and people think, "I'm doing this of my own accord. I'm doing it because I want to." They're not forcing
Hmm.
me. I'm choosing to do it, and that's incredibly powerful. So autonomy bias is a really powerful tool for us to use in business and in marketing.
You know what's wild about that? That my synapses were going a million miles a minute. So there's some stuff about parenting that I want to talk about with that. But before I get to that, it reminds me of like magicians a little bit, right? It's like, hey, you can cut the deck if you want. You can do like it's your choice, and you feel as if you've made the choice, but they've really controlled the entire thing all the way through. But there's a game show, and I'm trying to remember the name of the game show. The Monty Hall problem. Are you familiar with this? The Monty Hall problem?
I'm not sure. Not sure where you're
Okay,
going. Oh,
so they're
you
given,
want what's in the box or behind the curtain? Is that the one?
yeah, it's similar to that. So they're
Okay.
given three doors, and it's like, okay, behind door number one is maybe, behind one of the doors is like a Ferrari, and behind the other two are goats. And you pick a door, and they reveal one of the doors that you didn't pick to show that it was a goat. And then you have the option of either sticking with the original choice that you made or switching, and makes it feel as if you're just like, hey, you have the choice. You could do what you want. And people tend to often want to stay with their choice, which is a really interesting thing because statistically speaking, they have double the chance of being right if they would switch their choice at that point in time. It's a mathematical thing that it feels counterintuitive, but to your point, it's like the game show is almost making it seem like, hey, you can switch. It's your choice kind of thing. And so then you're just like, well, yeah, my choice. I'm going to stick with my choice.
Oh, that's interesting. That is, and you know what? There's a little bit of something called the endowment effect, I think, associated
Mm,
with that because it was my choice. Here's the
sure.
three. I've made my choice, and now that's mine. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, you can change it
Mm-hmm.
now if you want. And it's like, no, 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 that's mine. And what behavioral scientists have
Mm-hmm.
found is once we think of something as ours, we value it even more. Than, so
Mm-hmm.
if there's something that we want to acquire, well, obviously we value it. That's why we want to acquire it. But once it becomes ours, we place greater value on it. There have been studies that show, if you got a ticket to a game, right, a baseball game or something, a basketball game, um, and maybe you paid a certain amount for it, but the tickets are all sold out now, and so people are going to offer you money to buy your ticket. Because it's already yours, you will hold out for this huge amount of money,
Sure.
much more than you would be willing to pay if the situation were reversed, but
Sure.
because it's yours, it's why when people go to sell their house, they'll tell the real estate agent, no, 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 that's too low, it's got to be higher, even though the real estate agent bases it on the data about comparable sales in the neighborhood. But we
Mm-hmm.
have a tendency to overvalue things that are ours, so that might also be at play there. It's like, I made the decision, I chose box number one or door number one, I'm not going to move because now I'm
Yeah.
wed to it. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Sticking with the autonomy bias though for a little bit longer, and then I want to jump into that is parenting though, which is funny. We do this with your kids all the time when they're young, right? It's like, hey, would you like to do your homework now or in 15 minutes? Now they have a choice versus, hey, are you ready to start your homework? The choice is just yes or no. And it's like, well, you've eliminated, that's not the choice that you wanted to give them. The choice that you wanted to kind of force or control is, would you like to do your homework now or in 15 minutes? Well, now they get the opportunity to choose. And that's maybe a dumb example, but you get where I'm going with this, where it's like, they're still getting the outcome that I want out of this. I've still controlled the situation. But I've given them this feeling of choice. Are there any examples like that of autonomy bias being used very well that you could think of with a business?
Yeah, no, I mean, your example with the kids is a smart one. It's perfect actually. So with businesses, I was on a website for a pizza place, and they said something like, dine in, takeout, or delivery. The choice is yours. And so you feel like,
Mm,
okay, this is my choice, but whatever one I choose, they're going to win. They're selling some pizza,
sure,
they're selling it whether
sure.
I pick it up myself, whether I have it delivered, or whether I eat it there. So I thought that was an interesting, use of it. Every once in a while I'll find a sales pitch and they will end with, the choice is yours or it's up to you. And I think, I see what they're doing there. Somebody's plugged in. I got an email the other day from, I think it was Marriott Bonvoy, and they were showing me two different credit cards. And they had the two of them, and I mean, the credit card is a credit card is a credit card, but there were
Sure.
slight differences. And because there were two, instead of having to decide, gee, do I want a Marriott credit card, it was more like, oh, which of these two do I want? There's
Mm-hmm,
this
mm-hmm.
one with these bennies, and there's that one with those bennies, and so I do see brands out there using it and using it pretty well. But I still think it's underutilized. I still think there are more opportunities.
When you recognize that, because you see this so easily, when you recognize the tactics that people are using, does it make you appreciate it enough to want to give them your business, or are you almost turned off by it? You're just like, oh no, red flag, I just saw that, I know they were trying to control the situation?
No, no, no. I mean, honestly, the honest answer is I want to screenshot it and use it in one of my
Sure.
presentations. But no, it's if I recognize it, I kind of smile and I think, oh, that's pretty cool. I don't think any
Uh-huh.
any less of them. Maybe I think more of them because I'm like, oh, they're
Yep.
they're really working this. The interesting thing is, and I was just asked this recently. They're like, all right, someone said to me, like, you really know about this stuff, so do people who really know about it, are they like immune to it in a way? Like,
Mm-hmm,
or does it
mm-hmm.
just not work? And knowing about it and being immune to it are two different things, I guess. So I was telling this gentleman I was on vacation, and I decided I was going to treat myself to a glass of wine at this bar. So I walk in, I sit down at the bar, I look at the wine list, and I don't recognize a single wine on the wines by the glass list. Just don't recognize any of them. I know I want a glass of red. So the bartender comes over and I said, hey, listen, I'd like a glass of red. I don't recognize any of these. I like something that's got a little more leather or tannin. What would you recommend? And he immediately, William, recommends the most expensive glass of wine on the list. And I kind of look at it, I'm like, I don't think I'd spend that on a bottle, like that's a lot of
Yeah.
money. So I said, hey, I bet you it's good. I'm sure it is, but I'm not looking to spend that kind of money. Like, what's a little bit more moderately priced that might also fit my profile. And he says, oh, well, the blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. I'd like a glass of that. A couple minutes later, he returns and he has two glasses. with a taste in each, right? And
Sure.
he's like, here's the first one I recommended. Here's the second one. Yeah, give him a try, right? I didn't ask him to give. Yeah, I very
Uh-huh.
clearly said I'm going to take the second one you recommend. But he comes back with two, and I taste them, and they're both good. But that first one he recommended, the very expensive, it was quite good. And I found
Yeah.
myself saying, well, you know what, Nancy, you're on vacation. And you can indulge yourself, like give yourself a
Yep.
little reward. So I get it, and hours later, I'm back home at the hotel, or back in the hotel room, and I realized that what was happening there was something called reciprocity bias, right? If somebody
Mm,
gives us something, whether or not we ask for it, if they do us a favor, if they give us a gift, whether or not we ask for it, we then feel obliged to somehow return the favor. We want to, even the
sure.
score. We don't want to feel like we
Mhm.
owe somebody. And at the time, I wasn't thinking that way. At the time, I was like, gee, it is pretty good. And yeah, I this one time I can go for, I can splurge. And, so here's an example of someone who clearly, I have a whole chapter about reciprocity in my book, and it's an example of someone who clearly understands these tactics. And yet in the moment, I wasn't immediately identifying it for what it was, and
Mhm. Mhm.
so getting back to your question about like if I see somebody using another marketer, do I go, ah, they're trying to, no, I mean, if I see them using it and I happen to notice it, I'm like, that's pretty cool. Good, good for you. But a lot of times you don't even see it. And I have to almost be looking for it as opposed to being in the moment, like in the moment,
Sure.
that was a transaction. I was trying to order a glass of wine when I'm, kind of scrolling the internet or going through my email box. Sometimes I'm more in the frame of what's interesting here that I might need in a presentation or that I might want to write about later.
That's fair. So, okay, reciprocity bias versus I've got a story that, or at least an illustration that I'm going to use, and I want to see if it's reciprocity bias or if it's the Zeigarnik effect. And I don't know if is it Zeigarnik.
Zeigarnik, I think.
Okay, yeah, I read it in your book, so that's the first time I experienced it. So I wasn't sure how to pronounce it.
Yep.
Which one of these effects it is? Because I thought it was Zeigarnik, but then now I'm thinking maybe it's the reciprocity. So the example that I remember reading about was a car wash that gave somebody like a pamphlet with like 8 coupons or whatever, or 8 little like slots where they could fill out for, once they fill up all 8 of them with stickers, then they get a free car wash. The other one was 10 slots, but 2 of those slots already had stickers on them. So you only had to fill out 8 more to get your free car wash. Still 8, no matter what. But one, they found a significant higher adoption of people doing, and that was the 10 because of people wanting. In my mind, it's like I was thinking it's the Zeigarnik effect, where it's like, well, I've already got this. I want to finish this. Would you say it's probably that one, or is it more the reciprocity?
Yeah, no, I think it's I mean, it's interesting. I never really I know what you're talking about, and I never really thought about it in terms of reciprocity, and there could be a little of that, but I think of it more as the Zeigarnik effect, which is this, this idea that we keep in our minds incomplete things that
Mm-hmm.
are incomplete. Like if something isn't finished, if we can't check it off the list, if we haven't come to closure, if it's still kind of hanging there, it stays top of mind. It's why cliffhangers work so well in the media, right? It's like, my God, I can't wait for the next season of, whatever, Elsbeth
Yep.
to come out. Like, I want to see what happened to her,
Totally.
or 911 has their 3-part series, and that woman is up in the air flying the airplane, but she's not a pilot. Is she going to land it? I have to watch next week and find out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so I and there's a almost a companion behavioral science principle to the Zeigarnik effect, and it's called the I've seen oh my God, Ivansina. So I can't even pronounce it now. It's gone right on my head. But it's the idea that we're prone to not only remember it but act on it.
Mm,
And I think those two things are there. You've got the, it's I don't know, 12 boxes, but the first 2 are checked, so there's 10
mhm.
more to go. You remember it, and because there's that forward motion, there's that momentum. Um, I've seen Kina, I think it is. Anyway, you feel like I've got to finish this. You've gotten a head
Mhm.
start. So it's
Mhm.
but it's interesting. I've never thought about it as being a reciprocity thing. It's more of it's we've gotten started. Let's finish it
Sure.
off now so that we can cross it off the list. I think there was a study that came out of like Wharton and USC that showed that there was like a double digit likelihood of people finishing if the first 2 boxes were already pre-checked. So it's
Sure.
like 10 blank boxes or 12 boxes, but the first 2 are pre-checked. In both cases, you're going to have to do 10 purchases, right? But
Yep.
because they pre-checked 2, it's like, yeah, I'm going to go for this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what's an example of either one of those, reciprocity or the Zeigarnik effect, that you could think of in like, let's say, the e-commerce space? And if you can't think of an example, that's fine too. I'm trying to think of one, and I can't think of one off the top of my head.
I think, I mean, if you think about abandoned cart emails, that could very well be
Sure.
Zeigarnik, right? It's like, hey, you started, but you didn't
Yeah.
finish. Come back and finish, right? And then in terms of reciprocity, when you think about how-to videos or free guides, that a lot of websites will offer. I think that's a good example of reciprocity. It's like, well,
Sure.
they've got these videos telling me how to use, this, how to solve a problem. Maybe I'll buy their product. I mean, I could buy the competitor's product to solve the problem, but I'm going to buy their product because they put up this really good video telling me how to solve this particular problem I'm working on. Or they have, I was on a website that offered a free planting guide, right? It was like a
Hmm.
gardener supply website with this free planting guide. So then if I'm going to buy seeds, I'd probably go back and buy my seeds from them because they gave me the free planting guide. So I think those are two good examples. Yeah.
It's brilliant. You just unlocked that for me because I've used those types of lead gen things all the time. And in my mind, the reason why they were so effective is, one, you're capturing their email address, so you have the opportunity to remarket them later. You have already qualified them as being somewhat interested in the topic. You can retarget them now because they visited the website. You retarget them with ads, and so like, and then there's just the actual idea of like the brand recognition. So when they have to make a choice, they're like, well, here's this brand I've heard of versus this one I haven't heard of because I've already downloaded this. But I never thought about this, like this shortcut in the brain, like you said, of like the Zeigarnik effect, where they're like, no, the reciprocity bias, where they're like, I almost feel because you've given me something, I feel the need to want to give you the business. And I never thought about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and all of the reasons you just rattled off make perfect sense and are sound marketing. But yeah, there is this other reason, which
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
it's kind of that human thing about getting inside your customers' heads. And it's like, yeah, you did something for them, and so they're going to want to return the favor. And you almost
Mm.
feel a little guilty if you don't. I got this great guidebook here, but I'm going to go next door and buy from someone else. Hey, it's why even if you walk into a brick and mortar and they have free samples, right?
Sure.
I have so many bottles of wine in my basement because I go to these wine tastings, and it's like
Uh-huh.
and they tell you there's no obligation to buy, but after you've tasted a couple, it's like I don't want to walk out and not buy anything. Like they're so nice and they're chatting with me and they're telling me about the wine, and it's like the next thing you know, I'm buying a bottle that I liked, and home it goes, and in the basement it
Sure.
goes, and next week I'm at the wine tasting. I didn't use the bottle from last week, but I come back with yet a second one. You kind of feel bad if you don't. Yeah.
100%. Do you think that there's a regional component to that? Like, does that work more in the Midwest than it does maybe in the East Coast? Because I feel like as a Midwesterner, yeah, receiving something from anybody, even like a sample, you're just like, I mean, I didn't like the cheese, but I'm going to go ahead and buy one because they just gave me a free sample.
I don't know if it's even more
Sure.
prevalent in the Midwest than it is like in New England, where we're considered to be cold and hard to get to know. I
Sure.
don't I don't know, but I do know that it's a basic kind of hardwired human
Human.
behavior. So there
Mhm.
might be greater prevalence or lesser prevalence, but just kind of across the board, that's how humans are hardwired. And it's because if you go back to our ancient ancestors, if they didn't cooperate, if they didn't have some kind of interdependence, they would be banished, and if they were like kicked out of the tribe, they wouldn't survive on their own. Like back then,
Mhm.
you really had to work as a cohesive group, as a community. And so we're just hardwired from our earliest origins to reciprocate and
Sure.
to I do for you, you do for me, and that's how we both survive.
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. I think there's reciprocity is a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, You talked about the endowment effect a little bit. I want to bring that one back up because there's a good example that you had for this with the online wine store. Take me through the endowment effect a little bit more, especially how it applied in this online wine store.
Absolutely. I can see there's this like trend here going with the wine. It's like, oh, well, I went to the bar and then but yes, I will talk about this. It was an email that I got from a company called Lot 18, and they were having a sale on wine, and they wanted me to buy a bottle of wine by midnight tomorrow. But they didn't just say, hey, buy a bottle of wine by midnight tomorrow. They told me that I had a $15 credit in my account that would expire at midnight tomorrow
Mm,
or 11:59 tomorrow, right? So Mathematically, it's the same
Genius.
thing whether I'm applying a $15 credit or whether they're giving me a $15 discount or taking $15 off the price or sending me a $15 rebate. But psychologically, they're worlds apart, right? Because I have the credit. It's in my account and it's going to expire, right? So there's loss aversion
Mhm.
and the endowment effect. The endowment effect is it's mine, it's already in my account, and then loss aversion, it's going to expire tomorrow at 11:59 versus them having their sale until 11:59 tomorrow where they would give me or send me a discount, or a rebate. And
Mhm.
again, mathematically it's the same, but psychologically very different. It's like, oh my gosh, I've got $15 in my account, but it's gonna disappear. It's gonna evaporate if I don't use it. Well, I'm valuing that $15 so much more because it's already
Sure.
mine. It's the same
Mhm.
$15 that they would, if they said, hey, we'll take 15 off, but the difference is that's their 15 and this is my 15. Really, really powerful. I love that example. They were very smart to use it. Whether they used it deliberately, whether they tested their
Sure.
way into it, whether it was, serendipity, I don't know, but I love it.
Are there certain tactics like these that are more effective than others in a general sense, or do they range where it's like, hey, everybody has different ones that they're more reactive or responsive to, and so you should have a broad use of all of these tactics to make sure that you're maximizing your benefits to each individual type of person.
It's a really good question, and the way I usually approach it is I look at what the marketing challenge is, and a lot of times in marketing, it's we'll put together all the reasons why someone should come to our site, why they should buy our product, why they should subscribe to our service, and that's necessary. We need that, but I always say to my clients, we need to go a step further. Now we need to put together that list of why somebody might not want to do what we're asking them to do. Let's assume that our product is good and our targeting is good. Some people are going to say yes, but other people are going to be hesitant. And we need to know why. And we need to
Hmm.
then figure out how to overcome that hesitation. And so then based on what that reason why is that they may not want to buy, that's when I go in and look at the various behavioral science tactics and say, all right, which is the best one or the best couple that I can test to overcome that? So it's not like there's like one go-to. It really kind of depends on the problem you're trying to solve. I mean, that said, especially in e-commerce, I think two very popular ones that pop up a lot are the idea of social proof. A
Hmm.
lot of other people are
For
doing this,
sure.
so you should, millions served, most popular product, best-selling product. That's very helpful for people. It's a great decision-making shortcut. So we do see that a lot. And the idea of scarcity.
Hmm.
We value things when they're harder to get or when only certain people can get them. And so, limited time sales, limited quantities, time is running out, available only to people in this group. Those things also work very well. And we do see that often in e-commerce. But really, what we need to do is we need to think about what's the problem we're trying to solve. Like, why might someone not want to do this? And that really opens up the toolbox, if you will, and it gives us more things to play with in terms of influencing the behavior.
Yeah, I love that. It makes a lot of sense too that uh, different groups would have different ones at different times, and so you really have to kind of do the research and find out which one applies to the situation or the specific problem that you're addressing. Um, the social proof one, 100% see this all the time in e-commerce. I do feel like, how do we differentiate social proof now, though? One of the things I feel like we're seeing is everybody's doing the same kind of social proof. It seems like everybody's doing the same influencers and UGC, and it maybe feels like it's just become noise. Are there ways that people can do it better than just simply having influencers, or just saying that 50 million people like this or things like that? What are some better ways of doing that?
Yeah, so here's one that I often share with my clients, and that is we know that testimonials can work very well, right? They work well if they're positioned on a website next to the button. We
Yep.
know that they work in subject lines on emails, right? We just know that testimonials work. But here's the thing: most of the time when we're trying to pick a testimonial, we're trying to find the most glowing one we have, right? We want that one customer who said, Acme is the best thing since sliced bread, because we're like, this is awesome, right? Like they said it. You can't even buy this kind of, this press. This is fabulous, right? They love me. And the problem with that is people can be a little skeptical. And so we're better off when we're choosing a testimonial, we're better off finding someone who starts at that place of skepticism. I thought the
Mm,
price was a little high, but I decided to give it a try anyway. Boy, am I glad that I did. Or, I thought, all of these, every bank account, well, bank account's probably the wrong word, but every widget was the same.
sure.
But then I tried these guys. They really are better than the last people I used, because you think about where somebody is. They haven't decided
Mm,
to buy yet. They're reading these reviews. They're reading these testimonials. If they recognize themselves in it, that's what's going to grab them. So a lot of times, companies or and brands, they're like, well, I don't want to put that idea in someone's head. If they don't think we're too expensive, I'm not going to put a testimonial out there that says, gee, I thought they might be a little
sure.
pricey, but I decided to. But it's like, believe me, your prospects are already having those thoughts. So you're
Mhm.
better off running a testimonial that starts at that place of skepticism. It hooks people, and then they just come right along and they think, well, all right, this guy William said he thought the Acme widget might be kind of expensive, but he decided to try it and he is happy with it. That must mean I could be happy with it too. He rolled the dice, he took the risk, and now I'm going to be able to
Mhm.
benefit from that. So I think that's one way to approach the idea of social proof that's maybe not commonly used, that will help somebody stand out and still get that desired response that they're looking for.
I love it. And that's using reviews in a way that reaches people. We talked about, romancing the customer, but in order to romance anybody, it starts by being able to get on their level in some way, right? And I think that to your point of what you're just saying, um, answer those objections. One of the things I used to say, at least in the retargeting, let's say on meta ads, was it's like, what are the top three reasons why people uh wouldn't end up using your product, or think that they would, right? Because maybe price is one, and they're like, it's too expensive. Great, let's answer that objection. What's another objection that people might have? Blah 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 blah. Okay, great. Let's answer that objection. To your point, it's not doing you a disservice, it's actually benefiting you, because you're saying, I already know what you're thinking and I have an answer for you. Answer that for them.
Yep. Yeah. And not only it's, and I have an answer for you. It's like somebody
Sure.
like
Somebody
you
like
has
you.
the answer for you, which is
Ooh.
even stronger, right? It's like
Yeah.
not like you're saying, you might think that we're expensive, but let me tell you why we're really not. It's like, well, of course, that's your perspective. You're the marketer.
Sure.
But when another
Yeah, that's
customer says,
fair.
I thought they might be too expensive, but it turns out they're worth every penny,
Uh-huh.
it's like, oh, that can be really strong.
That's good. What about negative reviews? Where would this fit into this? And an example that I'll give of this, Liquid Death has done some fantastic ones, but one that I remember seeing not too long ago was the Bible app. It said zero, I think it said 0 stars, would not recommend, Satan. And it's like, okay, right? Like, so it further affirms that you actually are just like, okay, the person who I don't want to be like is saying, I don't recommend this. But like, is that still following within social proof, but it's just like anti-social proof in a way? Or like, where does that fall in?
That could very well just be there's something called the von Restorff effect, which is with this idea that we have a tendency to notice and remember things that are different, that stand out from their surroundings. So if you
Mm,
think about ratings and reviews, normally they're positive, right? I mean, like,
right.
why would a company put up a negative review like that? And so when you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, that surprised me, right? It stands out. It's not what you expect to
Sure.
see. It stands out from all the other reviews. And so I think it's a little bit of the von Restorff effect. I just used the word surprise. Surprise is really important, because when you can surprise somebody, it actually amplifies their emotions by about 400%, according to a study that came out of Scotland, University of Scotland, Scotland University, someplace in Scotland. But it amplifies your emotions by about 400%, and that's important to marketers for a couple of reasons. Because when your emotions are high like that, you're focused on the thing that surprised you, and as a marketer, we
Sure.
want people to be focused on it, and you're more apt to remember it. And as marketers, we want people to remember our marketing messages. So when you do something like that, people they notice them, they pay attention to them, they remember them, and that can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Um, there's another tactic that you and I were talking about before too, which is the motivating uncertainty effect. And you had a couple of good examples for this one, but you said, 68% more likely to complete a task with an uncertain reward. So we talked about like completing when there's a certain reward, you've got the car wash, the free car wash, you're going to get this. This is the reward you have or whatever. What do you mean by like this uncertainty reward?
So it's interesting. A lot of times in marketing, we use incentives. If you do this, you'll get this, right? If you buy today, you'll get 10% off. If you buy today, you'll get a free upgrade, right? It's like,
Sure.
I know what I need to do and what I'm going to get as a result. And we know that incentives work. I'm not saying that they don't. But some research came out of Chinese University of Hong Kong that found that people are actually 68% more likely to complete a task with an uncertain reward. And an uncertain reward is either I don't know what I'm going to get as a reward, or I don't know if I'm going to get one at all. Right. And so
Hmm.
that can be like
Hmm.
really, really powerful. There was a promotion that Sephora ran at one point where they were asking young ladies to upload photos of themselves wearing Sephora makeup for a chance to be featured on the Sephora website. So they didn't just say, hey, send us a picture and we're going to upload it. It was like, upload it for a chance. And so, you go out, you buy the makeup, you apply it. You're not going to return it. You've already purchased it and used
Sure.
it, right? And because you're 68% more likely with the uncertain reward, they probably sold more makeup that way than just making it a straight incentive, because what behavioral scientists have found is it's almost a reward in and of itself to find out, did my picture get chosen, right? To find out,
Sure.
whether or not I got something or what the something is. A lot of times, an e-commerce site will want to get your email address, like we were talking about earlier, and they'll say, "Hey, listen, enter your email address and you'll get 10% off your purchase, your next purchase." But if instead they said, "Hey, enter your email address and maybe you'll get 5, 10, or 15% off your next purchase," I'm more likely to enter just so I can see what I got. And from
Mm.
the retailer's perspective, they can control that so that from a financial perspective, they're still limiting their exposure. They're still giving out, if for every 5%, they also have a 15% and everything else is a 10%. They can balance it so that they're not going to be exposed financially. But people are much more likely to say, "Ooh, I'm gonna find out." Same thing with those spin to win. Am I going to get
Hmm.
$4 off, $5 off? Maybe I'm going to get it for free. I don't know unless I give that wheel a spin, and I'm more likely to give the wheel a spin just to see, right? That's
Sure.
rewarding to me.
It's wild. Kids' toys do this very well. I don't know if you've seen like the LOL dolls or some of these other things, but it's like you don't know what you're gonna get. You get your kid this toy, and it's like it lasts for 5 seconds because once they open it, it's like not even a toy they necessarily wanted to play with, but it was the surprise of whatever this toy was going to be. That was the exciting factor for them. I mean, baseball cards, another great example of this, right? It's like you rip open the pack, you don't know what's going to be in there, but it's the uncertainty of what's in this pack of cards. And I could have the autographed LeBron James basketball card, whatever, like this. Like, is that kind of like what you're saying here too?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like it's the finding out that becomes the reward.
Hmm.
Like we're so excited. It's like, all right, I'm not sure. Maybe it'll be
Hmm.
a bunch of cards I'm not interested in, but maybe it'll be that one wonderful card. Or maybe the toy will be something really cool, or maybe not. But it's getting it. That's
Hmm.
so exciting. It's finding out. It's satisfying our curiosity. And then a lot of times what happens is, for example, with the, enter your email address and you'll get 5 or 10 or 15% off, or spin the wheel and maybe you'll get $4 or $5 or free, is you get your reward, and now you're in what a behavioral scientist would call a hot state. And so hot state decision
Sure.
making happens. And, we've all heard the term, like, oh, let cooler heads prevail, or, but we're in this hot state where, kind of like, our emotions are amplified and we're much more likely to make that purchasing decision. So, oh, I just won $5. I have to spend it now. Or, oh, I just got 15% off. Let me order something. Whereas, if you waited for 24 hours, you might come back and then say, I don't really need, I don't really need to make that purchase. I don't, but at the moment you've just won something and you're so excited, and you just
Sure.
follow through on it.
So those were very popular for a while. They still are. But I've never been a big fan of them. And one of my biggest reasons for it is when you look at the LTV of customers that came through with an incentive to purchase at a discount versus just purchasing full price, the lifetime value of those customers is often wildly different, right? Like there's one that says, no, I see the value and I want to buy it, versus another one says, this is a game to me. You've offered me something. I almost feel obligated to buy whatever this thing is now that you've just tricked me a little bit. Not tricked me, but like you've amplified my emotions by 400%, and so therefore I'm buying, and I maybe wasn't going to buy before. Like they are different customers from a cohort perspective. Um, what do you think about, like, where's the line between like optimizing for the purchase now versus optimizing for like lifetime value?
Um, I think we have to look at what our goals are, right? Are we in growth mode?
Sure.
And if we are, maybe we need to pull in more people, more customers. But then I think a lot of it depends on what you do with those people afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So that you let them win something, or you gave them something because they entered their email address, so they made the purchase. But then it's up to us to cultivate them, to nurture them, to keep them in the
Hmm.
fold, or they could very well be that one and done. I came across some research that came out of World Data that found that you can maybe send out an email offer, and a huge number of people will try to respond after the offer has expired. And so our kind of our
Sure.
inclination is to say, sorry, it's over. But what they found was, if you don't just say, hey, sorry, you missed out, but you say, hey, sorry, you missed that, but let me offer you something instead. Like our buy one get one free is over, but here's a 20% discount if you're interested. That the lifetime value on those people can be substantially higher, and it
Mm,
might have to do with that idea of reciprocity. It's like, wow, okay, I missed out, but they're still doing something. It might be just that they've been kept in the fold, and then
I
continually
like that.
marketed to. And now you're like, gee, those were those nice people who cut me in on the deal after it was over. So you feel a little bit more obligated, you pay more attention. Maybe like, I don't want to miss the next deal and be late. But it was an interesting factoid that World Data shared about that. And I'm like, so I think a lot of it has to do with, once we get that initial purchase, what we do with those people. And to
Yeah.
your point, some of them might be one and done. I was only there for the promo and I'm gone. But there's probably a sizable, I would imagine, percentage of them that, if properly groomed and nurtured, we can turn them into better customers.
Yeah. In fairness, sometimes I'll also counterpoint my own example there, and I'll say, yeah, but the lifetime value of somebody that never purchased is zero. So you got to get them to buy in the first place. Um, what about run with an example here for me, just for fun? Because I see a lot of times brand founders, especially technical brand founders, rely way too much on science, and they're still convinced that it's like the science is what's going to sell. It's the features that are going to sell, and it's like, no, 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 you got to get past that. You got to get into this is the stuff that I want them to get, that I think can unlock bigger growth for them. And so I'm just going to come up with like a scenario. Let's say that this is a skincare brand, and they've got this wild new science behind it, this crazy new ingredient, blah, 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 whatever, right? And it's like the science is amazing, and they're a PhD, and they're like, this is it, and we're trying to go after the science. How would you try to reposition this highly scientific skincare brand with chemicals that I can't pronounce into, like, how would you get them to like reposition and start thinking about this in a more like emotionally driven behavioral approach?
So I think what we want to think about is, all right, well, what's the end benefit of this new skincare
Sure.
regime, right? This new cream or whatever. What does it do for you? And maybe it makes your skin smoother. But okay, then, well, what does that mean? So at the end of the day, maybe
Sure.
we're selling confidence, right? Like, I'm gonna look good.
Mm,
So maybe we're selling confidence, or maybe we're selling belonging. Like, I'm gonna feel like I've arrived and I belong to a certain set because now I use this product. Or maybe we're selling uh I- you know this feeling that I'm going to be able to one up uh my the other women on the street because I
sure.
have this. But it's gonna, and then I'm not saying we should walk away from the all the science behind it. That could become the reason to believe. And when someone says, why did you buy it, it's like, the science behind this is amazing, brand new. But what really got someone to buy was that emotional thing, right? We buy for emotional
Hmm.
reasons, we justify with rational reasons. So what I'm buying is confidence. What I'm buying is the hope that I'm going to look better. What I'm buying is the ability to fit in with these people that I admire. So we're selling we want to sell the emotion, and then kind of back it or support it with the science. But the promise, I think, needs to come first. Like, what is this doing for you? And it's probably going to make you feel better. It's going to make you feel more confident. It's going to make you feel more beautiful. And that's what people want.
That's brilliant. Yeah, yeah, I like that. This one's not one of the principles, but you have it in your book, and so I at least wanted to call it out a little bit. You talk about literary devices, which I really like as well. And again, one more, Reading Rainbow, right? Like another book that I love is The Elements of Eloquence by Mark Forsyth. But you talk about using literary devices, alliteration, homophones, etc., in order to help it to like stick better in people's mind, and in order for them to make these purchases. And so it's like it's not necessarily it's not the emotion itself, but it maybe helps to drive the point home and make it more memorable. Is that kind of how I understood that?
Yeah, it has to do with how the brain encodes information, and so words that start with a similar sound, for example, words that, like an alliterative phrase. So words that start with a similar sound get encoded in the brain in the same area, which makes them easier to retrieve. So the benefit is easier retrieval. You're more likely to remember
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
the particular product that you read about, and that's a good thing. Um, there's something called rhyme is reason bias, and we know that rhymes are memorable, right? So the idea of rhyme is reason bias is you can have two sentences, they both pretty much convey the same information. One rhymes, the other one doesn't. So woes unite foes, woes unite enemies. They both convey the same information. One rhymes, the other one doesn't. Not only is the rhyming one easier to recall, but studies show that people believe it to be the more truthful, more accurate
Yeah.
sentence, and it seems more credible, and as a result, it's more persuasive. And the reason for that is rhymes are easier for the brain to process. And when something is
Mm,
easier for the brain to process, it feels right. And if something feels right, it's not a big leap to assume that it is right. So,
sure.
we have an opportunity to use
Wild.
rhymes so that our slogan or our headline or our content title or our, I don't know, our subject line, it's easier to recall, but people actually believe it more, it becomes more persuasive. So there are definitely opportunities with these literary devices. It's not just people playing with words, but there's a real reason for why they're doing what they're doing, in terms of
Sure.
memorability and ease of recall.
It's just wild to think that because something rhymes, we believe it to be more true. I mean, I get it, but it is a really weird thing to think about with our brain. And like you said, this isn't just affecting kids. This is affecting PhDs. This is affecting absolutely every single human being, because this is just a shortcut of how our brain is wired to think.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty crazy, and when I first read it, I was like, why is that? So I dug more into it, and it's like, all right, it's easier for the brain to process, and when it's easy to process, it feels right, all right? There's
Right.
just less cognitive, energy, and so yeah, that it makes perfect sense. If it feels right, it must be
Mm,
right,
hmm.
We can take that leap.
That's wild. I've really enjoyed talking about these tactics. I also really like to get into the personal side of you. So, who is Nancy Harhut? It's something that I really just enjoy as a human connection. So let's dig in there a little bit. Uh, how did your childhood impact you, and do you think has helped you to become the behavioral scientist marketer that you are?
So it took me a little bit to get to where I am, but when I look back on it, I credit my mother because my mother was wildly overprotective, and for me to do anything that my friends were doing required a healthy dose of persuasion skills. And it's funny, years later, I look back on it and I'm like, no wonder I'm so interested in persuasion. No wonder I'm, so facile with these things. It was, trying to just live a normal kid's life, and do what my
Sure.
friends were doing. But she was just incredible. She and my dad married when they were both older. My dad got back from the war. They had me, and, the doctor basically said, this is going to be your only kid, because she was
Mm.
of a certain age. And she was not going to let anything happen to me. But I felt like I was, wrapped in bubble wrap all the time and just trying to, do stuff. It was like, got to convince mom. So I think that's the link. God love
You
her.
learn you learn the behavioral science by application of being a child to try to get your way with certain things, right? And then you're like, well, there must be some science behind this. Let me start putting words and vocabulary behind it.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I had to get my way. I had to be persuasive. Years later, I found behavioral science, and I'm like, oh, that's what was happening there. I get it now.
Yeah,
That was that technique. Yeah.
I love that. Are there any podcasts or books that you really enjoy? These don't even have to be business ones, just ones that you enjoy listening to that you think are fun to talk about.
Yeah, well, you know what? I just picked up something called The Mindful Body. It's a book by Ellen Langer, and Ellen Langer is actually the researcher. She's a Harvard researcher. She's the researcher who identified the word because as an automatic compliance trigger. When we see or hear the word because, we just start to agree before we've process what comes next. We just assume whatever's coming after that word because is a good, legitimate reason. And so it puts us in this agreeable mindset. And so I have been a fan of hers for years because of that. A lot of marketers have glommed onto that, but she's developed her career, and she does a lot with the mind body connection, and she was actually saying recently at a talk that I went to that it's not even like the two are connected, they're connected like two different things that are connected. It's like they're one and the same. And so anyway, she's got this new book out called The Mindful Body, and so I picked up a copy of that, and I'm really excited to read it because from her perspective, it's all about your health. But from my perspective, it's like it goes all the way back to her earlier research with because we're not really in the moment. We hear because and we just say yes. There are marketing applications, you know. So I'm particularly interested in for that reason. So there's that. In terms of a podcast, I love Melina Palmer's The Brainy Business. I love Roger Dooley's Brainfluence. There are definitely some good ones out there.
Yeah, those are good. You've got me wanting to read that book though now, because you were very convincing. That's something that I find interesting, and man, that sounds wild and fun. What's something that makes you cringe? Is there anything that you're just like, this is just frustrating, annoying, wish it didn't exist in the world?
Yeah, the current thing that's bugging me is I'll get a LinkedIn invitation, and it's no sooner do I accept it than the sales pitch comes, you know?
Yeah,
Um, and it just, I mean, and I know I'm not the only one who's annoyed by this. A lot of people are annoyed by the pitch slapping, I guess they call it. But
sure.
it's just, it's annoying. It's like, oh, someone reached out, they want to connect. I connect, and then,
Yeah.
without missing a beat, it's just like, boom, that annoys me. And then getting emails that are so completely mistargeted annoy me.
Hmm.
I'll get these and they're like, well, we've reviewed we've reviewed your agency, HBT Marketing's TikTok account, and we think that we can help you. And I'm like, no, you can't, because we don't have one,
Right.
and it's like, come on, so things like that just bug me. It's like, it's so
Uh-huh.
transparent that they're just fishing and trying to find something. But, it'd be one thing if, if we had an account, but it's like, no, you didn't do your research because we don't have an account. And so
Mhm.
those things bug me.
The ones that I always feel like are the best on LinkedIn, right? Are they're just like, I'm looking to expand my network. Okay, good for you. Like, how does that apply to me? Like, why
Right.
do you
Why
need to
should I
connect?
care?
How does that benefit me by you expanding your network? In what way have you
Yeah.
interested me? Can people come back from this? Somebody does pitch slap you on LinkedIn or sends you a very horribly targeted email. Is there an opportunity to come back from that as a business? It's like, yeah, we made a mistake, but let me fix it. Or is it kind of like your brand is kind of tainted in my mind, and it's gonna be very hard to re-earn my trust?
I think it's the latter. I mean, I wouldn't say it's absolutely impossible, but I think it's the
Yeah,
latter. It's like, you have, what do they say, one chance to make a good first impression, you blew it, and I'm just less likely to engage, to
yeah,
open anything, to engage with any other messages. I'm not saying it's impossible, but
sure.
it's a missed opportunity when you blow
Yeah,
that first one.
yeah. I'm with you completely. Um, you are a Broadway show tune fan. We were talking about this a little bit about. Tell me more about like Broadway show tunes, why you love them.
I just I think that part of why I love them is the language and the lyrics, right? They're
Mm,
just, we talked about rhymes. There are certain rhymes, but they're not always end rhymes. Sometimes they're slant rhymes. Sometimes they're, middle rhymes. That
hmm.
just some of the language. I was thinking about Wicked recently, and there's
Yeah.
there's a great line there where they say, "Who can say if I've been changed for the better?" But I know I've been changed for good, or something like that. It's very similar
Ooh.
to that, but it's like the lovely play on language, change for the better, change for good, and the better
Uh-huh.
good. I just love listening to really good show tune lyrics. I don't I don't know why, but I enjoy it. Whether it's, I think Avenue Q has some great ones. I think Wicked has some great ones. Um, Hamilton was fabulous.
Lin
So
Manuel
Book of
Miranda is
Mormon. I'm sorry.
yeah. Lin Manuel Miranda, like one of the genius lyricists of our time.
He's amazing. And we were talking about this earlier, and he did something called In the Heights. And I kept saying to you, it's called
Yeah.
like In the Neighborhood or something. And then afterwards, I was like, no, it's In the Heights. And that was this, that preceded
Yep.
Hamilton. And I went to see that thinking, I don't know if I'm going to like this. And I loved it, So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's just, for a writer, the lyrics and the language and the wordplay, I just really enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's probably your favorite all-time show tune?
Favorite all-time show. This is going to go back to one of the first shows I was in when I was in high school was Guys and Dolls. So I love
Mm.
the soundtrack to Guys and Dolls. I was in London last year, 2 years ago, and they did a revival of it in London. They did a like a theater in the round, so the audience is all around the stage, and the stage, the actors are in the center, and
Oh,
pieces of
sure.
stage came
Yep.
up and down. It was really interesting. It was a wonderful production. Um, and so I think, I can't even pick one song from that. I mean, there's Fugue for Tin Horns, which I happen to like. It's one of the early songs in the show, but almost every song in that show I think is terrific. Adelaide's Lament is very good. Um, yeah, the language, the lyrics in Adelaide's Lament are very, very good, actually. So, yeah, so it would have to be something in that show, I think.
So you said you were in this in high school. What part did you play, and are you still doing show tunes?
So, well, here's the funny thing. I was in the theater group, but I can't sing to save
Okay.
my life. So I had at the beginning of Guys and Dolls, they have something called Runyon Land, and it's just people. It's supposed to kind of recreate New York and the hustle and bustle of New York, and people are
Mm.
just walking back and forth, all these. And I was just one of those people who walked. I came walking in and I came walking back the other way. I had no lines. There were other shows they did where there wasn't music, and I had larger roles in those, but. I just
Oh.
remember the show. It was early on in my. It was probably when I was a freshman or something, and it was, you know, I really liked it. It kind of has an indelible imprint on my mind now.
That's really cool. I love that. I think show tunes are something that we can all get excited about the enjoyment of seeing people breaking out in song and dance in the middle of a street or whatever, right? Where it's like you didn't expect it. I think that's one of the things that I liked about flash mobs when those were a thing, where it's just like this is unexpected, but it's fun, and we need that lighthearted fun in the world.
I love it. I love comparing a musical to a flash mob. That's great. Because there are some people who are like, oh my God, musicals. In fact, there's even a musical where they have a funny line about that, and it's like, musicals where people will, stop and just burst into song for no apparent reason,
I love
and
that.
and some people are just like, oh my God, this is so frustrating. But for me, I'm like, I'm loving this. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Right there with you. Nancy, it has been absolutely amazing chatting with you. I feel like I've gotten to know you better. I've definitely gotten to learn a lot more about behavioral science and how to apply that within the e-commerce. If people wanted to work with you or they wanted to follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure, that would be great. I'd love to hear from any of your listeners. You can reach out to me. Our website is HBT Marketing. It's HBT, which stands for Human Behavior Triggers, and then MKTG. We abbreviate marketing, so HBTMKTG.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter, Threads, Facebook. We would love to hear from any of your listeners. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And this is
the
from me,
book is
not from you.
available. Well, I'm sorry.
But I said this is from me, not from you. But I am going to give another shout out to the book too. Show the title and the cover here, so that way it's like highly recommend this if you are at all remotely interested in what we talked about here today. This book is going to go in a lot more depth here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Using behavioral science and marketing, it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Kogan Page, the publisher, any place basically online. So thank you very much for that very kind shout out. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for joining me. I really have enjoyed you sharing your time, your wisdom with us, and everybody for tuning in. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.